The Rainbow Tower. Written by Alex Tymms. Illustrated by R H Stewart. Episode 38. Red. But why? Phillips looked at the flexing deck in despair. I know I'm only a technician, but I've overseen loads of jobs and this has never happened before. It has to be them, Fox said, pointing at a gang of enforcers fighting their way to the bridge with cutting tools. It can't be, Francis shook his head. I tell you, it was doing it before they got here. I said to myself, something don't look right. Okay, Francis, Fox was holding up his hands. We believe you. The question is, how do we stop it? First, we'd better stop them, Jed croaked in alarm. His voice was beginning to fail. The enforcers were beginning to attack where the bone deck met the tower. Come on! The Fox brothers ran to join the fray. As he ran with them, Jed noticed the refugees standing and watching. He stopped and turned to them, but as he tried to shout, to tell them to come and help, only a rasping whisper came out of his mouth. What he's trying to say, Katie shouted from beside him, making even Jed jump, is that if you don't do something now, then there really will be no way out. Jed glanced round to see the builders were struggling. There were just too many enforcers. He turned back, ready to drag the refugees forward if he had to find them all running straight for him. They sprinted past and cannoned into the fight. The enforcers were stronger, but they stood no chance against so many people. Thanks, Jed rasped. Let's take a look at the bridge, Katie said as the tide of refugees overwhelmed the remaining enforcers. Jed saw little point in following her. If the experts didn't know what was wrong, what was he supposed to do? He went all the same. Katie ran to the opening. Jed noticed no one was trying to walk out on the deck. It was moving too much for any chance of crossing safely. He stood by while Katie ran over to Phillips and began talking to him. Jed's throat still hurt, and he wandered in silence to the very edge of the bridge. It seemed impossible that such a huge structure could move like that. Then Jed noticed something. It was a whistle. The same whistle he'd heard when Fox had lowered him down the outside. He squinted at the bridge deck, then the tension wires at the side. They were vibrating, just like when his rope was strung tight. Then he understood. Everything Phillips had built was inside, where there was no wind. Somehow, the steady blast hitting the bridge was causing it to bounce. He was sure of it. Jed ran to Phillips and Katie, dodging groups of people trussing up the defeated enforcers. He opened his mouth, but all he could do was croak. Phillips looked confused. Jed saw a marker in Phillips's top pocket and grabbed it and scribbled all over the side screen of the loader. Wind. He then pointed furiously at the bridge. At last Phillips understood. Yes, he said, hitting his head. Of course! The wind! It's the wind! It must be something to do with the wind strength in relation to the length and width of the deck. He grabbed the marker and began to scribble diagrams and calculations all over the digger's bodywork. It must have set up a harmonic wave. But how do we stop it? Katie asked. Fox had come over. We have to alter the shape of the deck sides, Phillips went on. Stop them from being so vertical. If the wind flows over and under rather than forming eddies around the sides, the bouncing should stop. His face fell. Only we can't do that. Why not? Fox asked. Well, we could change the shape of the bone, but that would take hours. The structure won't last that long. It'll shake itself apart before we even started. What if there was another way to speed up the process? Katie asked. What if we could do it instantly? Phillips shrugged. Well, no problem, but I don't... My mum, Katie interrupted. She was working on something to make bone grow at rates so fast they were almost instant. It's what she was working on in her lab and what I was playing with when they were all killed. What do you need? Fox asked. Some way of getting that fluid from the lab to here. Before any of them could move, Jed had wrenched open a small door with fire written on it just inside the opening of the bridge. He hauled out lengths of red tubing. Phillips grinned. "Go," he said. "We'll connect more hoses from here, then set up feeder lines to the bridge. Hurry!" Jed and Katie sprinted down the corridor against the flow of refugees, Jed dragging the pipe behind him as Katie, yelling at people to move, shoved her way through the throng. What they didn't see was a figure in dark glasses watching where they ran. "Are there any stairs on these levels?" Katie called to Jed as she pushed her way forward. Jed shook his head. As far as he had seen, the growing levels were all fed by lifts. They both looked at each other. "Same way we came up?" she asked. Jed nodded. They reached the hole in the wall they'd made from the lift shaft. Jed looked at Katie, then dived inside. She followed, heaving the pipe behind her and pulling it over the edge of the blockwork. Below, Jed went from beam to beam, guiding the hose so that it was away from where the lift ran. The last thing he wanted was for the car to sever it. Above him, Katie kept feeding the pipe, then jumped down to join him, clearing the space between them with ease. "How far?" he croaked as he passed the hose to her. "I think we're nearly there," she said, pointing to a set of doors not far below. Jed wedged the doors open with a gilt-framed chair from the lift lobby as Katie ran down the corridor, dragging the pipe behind her. He sprinted to join her, finding her outside a very normal-looking door with a small locking panel to one side. She looked frustrated. "Oh, my key card! They confiscated it in yellow!" she cursed, handing Jed the end of the hose and pulling out her screwdriver. "Well, we'll just have to try this." She prized off the lock cover and stared. "You stupid cow!" she swore. "My stupid bloody mother! Always too bloody clever!" Jed looked at the small opening. It was a tangle of nerves, all held in place by a muscle bundle. "Why did she do this?" Katie said in despair. "Every time, just to prove she was smarter than everyone else." She slumped against the wall. "I hate her sometimes," she said quietly. Jed looked at her and suddenly realised it wasn't just him who'd had trouble with his parents. He'd been racked with guilt at viewing his mother as an evil monster one minute, only to wish he had known her the next. Now he saw Katie going through exactly the same thing. "Let me try," he whispered. He put his hand against the lock, trying to picture the building as he'd done when standing inside the plans. He thought of the building's heart, of his father encased in bone, and he felt the warmth of the muscle and the tingle of the nerves beneath his fingers. Then he realised there was something else too. Something familiar and yet not. Something unnerving. Jed tried to feel what it was, to push deeper, when suddenly beside him the door clicked open. "Come on!" Katie dragged him through the open door. His fingers left the lock just as he was about to reach it, to understand what it was. In frustration he turned to curse Katie, only to stop and stare. In the middle of the lab, and to which Katie was dragging the end of the hose, was a round glass vat mounted on a podium. It was full to the brim with bile-coloured liquid. "We can splice the pipe to the pump. I just hope there's enough pressure to force it all the way there," she said, connecting the red tube to shiny metal equipment making up part of the podium. All around them were jars and tanks holding bits of bone and tissue. "The main pump switch is over there. Turn it round until it clicks." Jed didn't move. He knew the vat contained the harvested remains of all those processed in the blue levels, the retired, the sacked, those murdered in the Red Death. Katie's mother. "Jed, the switch!" She was cranking another part of the machinery to prime the pump. Jed hesitated. Should he tell her? Should they really use this evil liquid, even though he knew that without it they would all die? "Jed!" He threw the switch. Jed closed his eyes and prayed that all those people would understand. And suddenly he knew something of the decisions his mother had been forced to take. Suddenly, he knew that things weren't always black and white, but a terrible shade of grey. He opened his eyes to see the bile-coloured liquid snaking its way from the vat and down the tube. Then he noticed, ranged against one wall, a line of waste chutes. Had this stuff been thrown down the waste? Had Katie's mum helped create the thing now devouring the tower? "Are you okay?" Katie asked, shouldering on a small tank-like backpack and attaching a lance-like nozzle and hose to her arm. Jed nodded, knowing he wasn't. "Here," she said, handing him a small spray she'd pulled from one of the drawers near her. "It's for your throat. Mum used to get tracheitis. It always helped." Jed shook the bottle suspiciously, but the liquid inside was clear. He sprayed the back of his red and sore mouth to find instant relief. "Thanks," he said, at last sounding normal again, but he couldn't return Katie's smile. The sight of the liquid snaking away made him wonder if he really had done the right thing. Together, they turned back towards the door, only to stop dead. Blocking their way out was Swenson, and he was not alone. Thank you very much for listening to The Rainbow Tower. To see more of R H Stewart's excellent artwork, you'll find him on Instagram at roy.hootson.stewart. For Alex Tymms, why not try the novel OutCaste at ao3.com? Or, for something completely different, check out the Amier series on YouTube or at amier.com, also by Alex Tymms. The Rainbow Tower. Text copyright Alex Tymms. Illustrations copyright R H Stewart. The right of Alex Tymms and R H Stewart to be identified as the author and illustrator of this work has been asserted in accordance with the Copyright Designs and Patents Act 1988.